Hi class, today we're going to look at combining like terms and also distribution. So for today's video, I know that we've already done some practice with this on Khan Academy, so I just want to reinforce what we've already done, make sure that there aren't any other questions. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to identify in this expression any like terms that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my pen, any like terms. So I want to go ahead and look at this. Let's go ahead and look at the x squared first. And I want to see in this expression, are there any other x to the second powers in the rest of this expression? And there are not. So let's skip ahead to our next term. I underlined my first one, so let's go ahead and circle this next one. And I am circling the sign too, just because of some of the other work that we're going to have to do with these later on. So now for this one, I want to look for any other terms that have just an x. This one had been an x squared. Now I'm looking for just x's, and that would be this one right here. So I looked for any of my terms that had x squares. There was just the one. I looked for any of the ones that had just an x. There were two. Now let's go ahead. What do I want to do for this last one? Let's go ahead and make a little zigzag under it to identify this one doesn't have a variable. So do I have any other terms that are like this one that do not have a variable? That would be this one down here at the end. So now I've identified all of the terms that have an x squared, all of the like terms that have just an x, and all of the like terms that have no variable. Let's look at the next example. Identify the like terms here. So again, I'll go ahead and start with an underline, and it doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm just going to go ahead and start with the underline again. Here I have a z squared to start with, and back here I have another z squared. Now my next term has a z cubed, which is matched back here. So like terms, the variables have to be exactly the same. Exactly the same. This one was a z squared. This one here is a z squared. 8. The positive 8 has a z cubed. The negative 1 has a z cubed. Now let me look here. This one has just an x. So I'm looking at one that has the same identical variable, and that is this one right here. Okay, so like terms are going to be ones that have the same exact variable, or if I want to think of it, the same lack of variable, as in the case up here with the -4 and the 2. So really what's happening with these numbers without the variable is that I have an x squared, an x to the first power, and then really I have x to the 0th power because it's not there. But that's for another day too. So here I'm going to simplify the expression by combining like terms. Let me go ahead and look at this term right here and this term right here. They have the same exact variable, same power, same letter, and everything. So I can go ahead and combine these two. In order to combine that first negative x, though, I actually want to think of that as a -1x. If there's no number written here, I can always put a 1 in because multiplying by 1 is just going to give me x. or in this case, multiplying by -1 is going to give me a negative x. So if I add the -1x and the -2x, I get a total of -3x. Looking at our next one, I have a y here and 2 x's. So I can just rewrite that y, that -1/7 y. I can't combine that -1/7 with either of the other two terms in the expression. So I can go ahead and combine these other two terms, a -7 and a +1. Again, if I don't have a number, I can, I can assume that that number out front is a 1. So a -7 and a +1 give me a -6x. And I want to, let me actually write that differently. Let me put that over here, and I want to subtract my 6x. I can either write this as -6x or plus a -6x. So here for number 3, let's go ahead and circle my like terms. I have this 5b to the 5th power. Well, which one of these terms is like this one? That would be this last term. Okay, just that last one. So I have 5b cubed, 5b to the 5th and -3b to the 5th. Those two can combine, but this 3b, that is not the same. The variable b is not the same as b to the 5th. So combining that 5b to the 5th minus 3b to the 5th is going to get me 2b to the 5th power. B to the 5th power plus 3b. I can't do anything with that 3b other than just bring it straight down. So we are going to go ahead and look at these other problems either during our Google Meets or during class. So let's go ahead and look at our distribution. So when we distribute something, that means we're going to be giving equal shares, or we're going to be giving something to each participant, something like that. So if I'm distributing flyers, I'm handing out flyers to each person. That idea can be connected with the math word distribute because I'm taking this first term here and distributing it to each of the two terms inside the parentheses. So I'm going to take this -2 and our parentheses, when there's nothing written in between here, this is going to indicate multiplication. So let's go back just for a second. So just like we did here, where the parentheses are right next to each other, or I have a number, parentheses, something inside parentheses, that parenthesis there is going to indicate multiplication. So I have the same thing here, where I have -2 times the stuff in the parentheses. So I want to go ahead and take that -2 times -2. So -2 times a -2. And I'm going to add that addition because this middle sign in here is addition. Add that to a -2 times, I took the -2 times the -2 on the inside, and then the -2 again times the x. So I get -2 times -2 to be a +4. Two negatives make a positive. And then a -2 times an x gives me a -2. And -2x. I can write that as 4 plus a -2x, or I could write it as 4 minus 2x. Either way, either answer is acceptable. So here I'm going to do the same thing when I bring in or distribute the 7 to both of these terms. I end up having this multiplication between the 7 and the 1/7. Well, remember from our multiplication lessons that 7 times 1/7 is the same as 7/1 times 1/7. And this 7 and 7 are common factors, so those cancel to become 1. We can also remember this by saying a number times its reciprocal is 1. So 7 times 1/7 is 1, and 7 times -y is a -7y. I want to take whatever number is out here in the front, or if I have something out in the back, I want to distribute it to each term inside the parentheses. So here for number 11, I actually have this 5 that's going to be brought in to 3 different terms. Because the 5 is on the outside of the parentheses and all 3 terms are on the inside of the parentheses. So 5 times b is just 5b. 5 times 1 is just 5. And 5 times -c is a -5c. Now we are going to look at some of these problems in our either our Google Meet or in class the next time we meet. But for number 13, let's go ahead and take a look. Now, instead of just one term up front, now I have 2 terms inside one parenthesis and 2 terms inside another parenthesis. I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to have to repeat it twice. So I'm going to take this y and distribute it into both terms of the next parenthesis, and I'm going to take the 2 and distribute it into the second parenthesis. So y times x just gives me an xy. We usually write those in alphabetical order, but yx would have been just as sufficient. So y times x can be written as xy. Y times 1 is just y. And then we have 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times 1 is 2. In this case, if I look at my variables here, I have an xy. If I try to match that up with any of my, let me grab a different color here. If I try to match that up with any of my other variables here, I notice that this one has both an x and a y. This one just has a y, and this one just has an x. None of these terms have the exact same variable combination, so I cannot combine any of these. Despite the fact that these two have a y in common, it's not enough. All of my variables have to match exactly in order to combine like terms like we did on the previous page. So I hope this does help you go ahead and get started. Actually, let's go ahead and look at number 19 before we stop here. I'm going to go ahead and take this 4 and distribute it to both terms inside the parenthesis that it is in front of. And then I want to take the 6 and I want to distribute it to the terms inside its parenthesis. So don't let this problem worry you. It's just basically like two different problems smushed together with this little plus sign. So 4 times x just gives us 4x. Four times a -2 is a -8 or a -8. And then a 6 times x gives me a positive 6x. And then 6 times 3 is 18. Now if I look at my terms here, I do have different variable, or I do have like terms where I have my common variables, is what I meant to say. So 4x's and 6x's become 10x's, or 10x. And then -8 and positive 18 give me a total of positive 10. Now, if at any point it becomes to where you would like to use your plus and minus tiles to do any of these combination of -8 and positive 18, or what was the one that we were working on before? The -1 and the -2, -7 and positive 1. If you're adding or subtracting and you would like to use those plus and minus tiles, please go ahead and do so. It is just going to help you show your work, and possibly, if I can tell where you're making a mistake, you may not lose all points if you are showing me some work versus just having an incorrect answer if you're not sure. So that is it for simplifying expressions using combining like terms and distribution, including distribution where we are using, I actually forgot to mention that this method is called, let me grab a different color here. Oh, I do have. This method is called the FOIL method, where I had two parentheses multiplied times each other. And not just this word FOIL here just kind of helps us remember that we need to do this multiplication 4 times. So we need to multiply the front of this times the front of the second parentheses, that's our F. I need to multiply the outsides, the first term here and the last term here would be the outsides of those two parentheses. I need to multiply the two inside terms, the 2 and the x, and I need to multiply the two last terms, the 2 and the 1. I don't know which way is easier for you to remember, whether or not using the acronym FOIL helps you remember that there have to be 4, the fronts, the outsides, the insides, and the last terms, or if it's just easier to remember, I'm going to take that y and multiply it times both terms. I'm going to take that 2 and multiply it times both terms, whichever way works for you. But that ends our lesson, little mini lesson here. We will go ahead and work on some of these problems we've left blank during our Google Meet or in class. If you have questions, let me know. Have a good evening.